Hello everyone, it's great to be back. Welcome to another lesson. I hope you're all very well. Today's lesson was requested by Abdul, so thank you very much for that. And please, if you have any requests for lessons, if there's anything you would like to know, then let me know in the comments below and I will do my best to make lessons for that. In this lesson, we will look at relative pronouns. So who, which, whom, that, and whose. Relative pronouns are used to introduce relative clauses. Now, a relative clause is the part of a sentence that gives more information about people or things. He is the man who has 3 dogs. In this sentence, who is the relative pronoun and who has 3 dogs is the relative clause. It gives more information about the man. Firstly, let's look at who. And who is used to describe people, and it can also describe pets and animals when there's a close relationship. For example, they are the people who love movies. Who is used to introduce defining clauses. For example, she is the person who sang the song. It can also be used to introduce non-defining clauses. For example, my cat, who is friendly, is sitting over there. Don't worry too much if you don't understand defining and non-defining clauses. We will look at those in more detail later in the lesson. Who can also be used to start a question. For example, who's that girl? Or who's the person in the red jacket? When we use who with a preposition, for example, at, with, to are prepositions. The preposition goes at the end of the clause, at the end of the relative clause. For example, she's a girl who I'd like to dance with. Or he's the person who you were talking to. So note that it would not be he's the person to who you were talking. We don't use the preposition before the pronoun with who. We can also use prepositions at the end of questions. For example, who did you go with? Who can be used with collective groups of people. For example, a team, the police, government, organization, etc. For example, I called the police who came very quickly. So the police is the collection of people, the collective group. Or Bayern Munich, who are a strong team, have won many matches. So Bayern Munich, the famous German football or soccer team, are the collective group. Now, let's look at which. And which can be used to talk about animals or things, not people. For example, this is the book which I finished yesterday. And like who, it's used to begin defining clauses. It's the book which he read last week. It can also be used to introduce non-defining clauses. For example, that's the movie which I really love, starring Harrison Ford. I don't know, do you like Harrison Ford? I think he's a great actor. And of course, we can use which to begin questions. Which pen is yours? Which can also be used with prepositions. So in more formal situations, the preposition goes before which, and in more casual situations, the preposition goes at the end of the relative clause. Let's have a look at some examples. There is a shop At which you can buy used clothes. So this one is more formal. It goes before which, at which. Or we can say there is a shop which you can buy used clothes at. So it's more casual. At goes at the end of the relative clause. The preposition can also be put at the end of the question. Which car did you come in? Now, let's talk about whom. And whom is the objective pronoun of who. So it describes a person, but as an object, not the subject. And whom is mostly used in formal situations and in writing. It's not used very commonly these days, especially in casual conversation. You can also use who as an objective relative pronoun. So let's compare who and whom. He was one of the people to whom I'd spoken. Very formal. Or he was one of the people I'd spoken to. So casual in this situation. And it sounds much more normal in everyday conversation. And whom is used to begin defining clauses. For example, she is a person whom I've liked for a long time. And to begin non-defining clauses. The boy whom I taught is by the door. Whom is often used with a preposition. And the preposition can go before whom or go at the end of the relative clause. They were wonderful people with whom I had a lot in common. Or they were wonderful people whom I had a lot in common with. So the first sentence, the preposition goes before whom. The second sentence, it goes at the end of the relative clause. When whom is used in questions, the preposition can go at the beginning of the question. For example, to whom are you referring? Or at the end of the question, whom are you referring to? Now, let's move on to that. And that can be used to replace who, whom, or which. And it's a very general one. We can use it to talk about people, animals, or things. It's also used in more informal situations. So it's very common in everyday conversation to use that. Now the key here is that can only be used in defining clauses. I knew a girl that was an amazing singer. So in this case, that is replacing who. There's a beautiful mountain that has snow on it. So in this case, it's replacing which. We saw someone that we thought was Selma Hayek. Maybe. In this case, that is replacing whom, so the object, or objective pronoun of who. When we use that with a preposition, the preposition can only go at the end of the relative clause. I saw a man that I played soccer with. So not, I saw a man with that I played soccer. No. And the last relative pronoun is whose. And whose is the possessive. So we can use it to talk about people or animals or things. Things in some situations. It's not common, but some situations. Because it's a possessive relative pronoun, we use it before a noun instead of pronouns such as his, her, their, our, its, etc. He has a dog whose name is Spot. So the idea is he has a dog. His name, the dog's name, is Spot. And whose is used to begin defining clauses. For example, there was a cat at the park whose fur was green. Green fur. The fur was green. Very strange. And it can be used to begin non-defining relative clauses too. For example, the woman whose dress was red was at the event. And whose can be used with things in more formal situations. For example, it's a huge hotel whose roof has a swimming pool. Sounds very nice. Whose can be used to begin a question. For example, whose bike is that? When whose is used with a preposition, the preposition usually goes at the end of the relative clause. For example, John, whose place we had the party at, went to school with Catherine. But the preposition can go before whose in very formal situations. So John, at whose place we had the party, went to school with Catherine. Now, they were the 5 basic relative pronouns. There are also situations where we can omit or we can get rid of the relative pronoun. And this is often used when the pronoun is the object. And it is only used in defining clauses as well. For example, Vietnam is a country which, or that, I've been to many times. We don't need to say which or that. We can say Vietnam is a country I've been to many times. Or they are people who, that, or whom I admire very much. Again, we don't need to use the relative pronoun. They are people I admire very much. When we don't use the relative pronoun, we can use these clauses with prepositions, and the preposition goes at the end of the relative clause. There was a great idea I wanted to talk to you about. So in this case, we're replacing which or that. There was a great idea that I wanted to talk to you about. So the preposition about goes at the end of the clause. Now, I have talked a little bit about defining and non-defining relative clauses. Now, these are important. These are an important part of relative pronouns. So let's look more closely at these so you have a better understanding. Defining relative clauses are used to give essential information about a person, animal, or thing. So we need that information to understand the subject. So the information is important for the meaning of the sentence. And the defining clause comes immediately after the noun it is describing. For example, she is the girl who wants some ice cream. So who wants some ice cream is the defining clause. If you imagine just she is the girl, I would think who? Which girl? I need more information. Or these are the books which are important. So again, which are important is the defining clause, the defining relative clause. If you just said these are the books, I would think which books? Again, I need more information about the books. Or they need to find somebody whom they think will be good for the company, or who they think will be good for the company. This is the defining relative clause. Who or whom do they think will be good for the company? It defines, it gives essential information about the person they need to find. And in conversational English, that is usually or often used instead of who, whom, or which in defining clauses. I think we talked about that before. For example, she's the girl that wants some ice cream. These are the books that are important. They need to find somebody that they think will be good for the company. And in relative defining clauses, relative pronouns can be used to describe the subject or the object of the verb. For example, she's the girl who or that wants some ice cream. So in this case, who or that is describing the subject, the girl, the subject. If we break it apart, you can think she's the girl, she or the girl wants some ice cream. so it's the subject. If I say she's the girl who, whom or that I saw at the ice cream shop, the girl becomes the object. So think, she's the girl. I saw her at the ice cream shop. So she has become the object. The object is her. And note that in writing, we don't use a comma with relative defining clauses. For example, he's the boy who eats hamburgers, not he's the boy who eats hamburgers with a comma. Also note that when the relative pronoun is the subject of the relative defining clause, we don't use another pronoun with it because the subject is the same and we don't need to repeat that. For example, these are the songs that are cool. So that refers to the songs. These are the songs that, so they are cool. But we don't say, these are the songs that they are cool. No, these are the songs that are cool. We don't need to repeat the songs or they. Also note that when the relative pronoun is the object of the relative defining clause, we don't use another personal pronoun. So, she's the lady who I talked to yesterday. Not, she's the lady who I talked to her yesterday. We don't need the personal pronoun her. Now, we just looked at defining relative clauses. Let's look at non-defining relative clauses. These are relative clauses that give extra information about a person, animal, or thing, and this information is not important for the meaning of the sentence. And a relative pronoun is always needed to introduce a non-defining relative clause. For example, Jenny, who lives in Spain, came to visit last week. So it's extra information about Jenny. You could say Jenny came to visit last week. The sentence is perfectly fine by itself and the meaning is the same. Or, there were many flavors at the ice cream shop, which all looked delicious. So again, there were many flavors at the ice cream shop is a correct sentence and the meaning is the same. And note that that is not used to begin a non-defining relative clause. For example, Jenny, who lives in Spain, came to visit last week. We cannot say Jenny, that lives in Spain, came to visit last week. Note that in writing, we use a comma or commas to surround a non-defining relative clause. And in spoken English, there is often a pause after the non-defining relative clause. For example, my cat, who loves fish, kept me awake all night. So there's that pause. My cat, who loves fish, pause, kept me awake all night. So let's compare some relative defining clauses and relative non-defining clauses to see how the meaning changes. As a defining relative clause, that dog who is running around is really big. We imagine there's more than one dog. So we think, which dog? Which dog is it? Oh, the one that is running around. It is essential information to define, to give meaning to the sentence, to understand which dog we are talking about. As a non-defining relative clause, we would say that dog who is running around is really big. So the words are the same, but the meaning changes a little. In this case, there is only one dog. We can see there's only one dog. The non-defining clause, who is running around, is extra information. We don't need it to understand the meaning of the sentence. That dog is really big. We can understand there's only one dog. So we don't think which dog. As a final note, and maybe an advanced idea, remember to place the relative pronoun after the noun it is describing. This avoids confusion. It makes it easier for us to understand which noun the pronoun is describing. For example, the sister of my friend who is called Becky came with me. In this sentence, it's not totally clear. Who is Becky? Is it your friend's sister or is it your friend? So we could say, my friend's sister, who is called Becky, came with me. This time it's totally clear. So sister, we're describing sister. It comes before the relative pronoun. Or rather, the relative pronoun goes after the noun we want to describe. Now, I've talked long enough. It's your turn to do some practice. You can write your answers in the comments below, and I will try to check as many as I can. So I will give you some information, and I want you to make a sentence using a relative pronoun. For example, the student gave an answer. The teacher was happy with the student. So you could say the teacher was happy with the student who or that gave an answer. Okay, so make a sentence using a relative pronoun. Now your turn. You can press pause if you need to write answers, or you can go back and watch it after. My friend gave me a present. I didn't like the present. Okay, so write your answer. There was a dog in the park. It jumped on Sam. Yuko studies English. Yuko is my friend's sister. Rena bought a car yesterday. She drove it to the beach. Okay, write your answers. And that is the end of the lesson. Yay! Thank you so much for watching as always, and I really look forward to reading your comments and reading your ideas below using relative pronouns and of course relative clauses. Non-defining relative clauses and defining relative clauses. I really hope you learnt from this lesson and you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. See you later.